Hey y'all, we're going to continue with our experts roundtable here coming from Boatwrx. This is the countdown series, roundtable series with the pros and all the guys that can't fish the Big Bass Bash. This is Bass and Bob behind the camera. Hopefully you enjoyed our conversation with Randy Terrell. If not, we have that up separately and connected to this video as well. So we appreciate Boatwrx for hosting this series. We're going to do this every week leading up to the Big Bass Bash. Today is April the April the 5th. So we've got 2 more of these before the Big Bass Bash. We do them every Tuesday evening here at Boatwrx, and then get them on the website either later tonight, Tuesday, or Wednesday. And so we got 2 more coming in the series. They're on the website for free. So you have that opportunity to either see them on our website for free or on Boatwrx YouTube video as well. This is countdown to the Big Bass Bash. We're 0 minus 17 days. I know all you guys are out there thinking about the Big Bass Bash, getting ready. We talked last week a lot about preparation, like what can you be doing 4 weeks ahead of time to prepare for the Big Bass Bash, getting your rods and reels ready, looking for information like bassandbob.com. And so we're just going to continue with what's changed over the last week in terms of the bite, lake conditions. Obviously, as we get closer to the Big Bass Bash, we're going to have a whole lot more insight to what the conditions are going to be. So anyway, tonight I'm going to start off with bassing Rob right here, Rob Bueltmann, my son. I'm proud of him. As you probably have seen, if you follow the tournaments, Robbie and his partner, Ben Veerhoff, both of them work at their respective Fitz Fishing.
Work together.
Bait and tackle shops. Robbie runs the one by PB2, and Ben runs, Ben's kind of like a general manager overall, but pretty much runs them all. But Robbie and Ben work together running the Fitz Fishing shop. So Robbie and Ben did something I've never seen since I've been here at Lake of the Ozarks, and I've talked to some other guys that have never seen it either. They caught 25 plus pounds on Saturday in the Anglers in Action tournament to win that tournament, and they turned right around on Sunday and won and caught 25 plus pounds in the Anglers Choice tournament. I think 3 plus 6 pounders, a whole bunch of 5 pounders, a whole bunch of fish that would be cashing some checks. So Rob, tell us what's going on with the fish right now, and what do you anticipate on 0 minus 17?
I will say this, it just kind of wrapped my head around the whole thing. I kind of haven't really thought about, everything that kind of transpired. I, was a little bit under the weather both days. And really haven't got to soak in, and man, it was incredible. We didn't have a whole lot of practice time. My man Ben got out there on Friday and kind of dialed a little something up, and he told me in the calmest Ben Veerhoff voice that I think we're going to be okay. So that was cool. That always makes you feel good when your partner's out there, and especially a guy like Ben who's so credible and always so upfront. But yeah, the fish have really, this time of year, I like to say they're always on the move. They know that the spawn is near. I've learned from Wayne, and I've learned from all the guys that we sit around our Bass and Bob tables with about how these fish work on the Lake of the Ozarks for the past 8 years. And what I do know is that usually, except for maybe last year, is the first year I really didn't see it happen, but usually the third.
They had COVID.
Yeah, probably. They just didn't get the memo. No, I think the water was cold.
No,
there's a lot of other things. But anyway, the third week in April, they always spawn. It always is that third week. Wayne will tell you, Robbie, it's always, So what they do is they set up in the staging spots about this time where we caught them. And what we found is where they usually are this time of year is around the little gravel, flatter points.
Main lake?
No, not main lake points. Just flatter gravel points in a big creek, in a small creek, you can throw it the main lake. We had a few bites out there. That's a whole nother kind of deal that I'll get into, but it's really just these little flatter gravel points in shallower water. And they were set up on the shoulders of them. And what makes me think about them being set up the way they were is what you're kind of getting to is the current. We've ran an abnormal amount of current early. For this lake, usually we don't run this kind of current this early in the year. Usually, we let it come up a little bit, but we've had a lot of rain west of us and here as well, south of us as well. And they're kind of keeping it around the 655, 654, and eventually they'll let it come up to full pool, because I want to say that they didn't anticipate this rain bringing the lake up that much, and it was going to bring it up too much for Ameren's liking. So therefore, they've been running 35,000, 20,000, 17,000. And in me and Ben's rule book of current on Lake of the Ozarks, it's always been a 15,000 to 17 to 18 to 19 to 20 is enough to kind of position the fish. Now, I really go back on also saying I think these fish would have been in these positions anyway.
Right.
But I really think the current that has been run through this lake positioned them even better. It really got them on that assembly line. It really got them to where they're going to pre-spawn at, feed up on shad. The buffet line is in full effect, kind of thing.
Right.
And it really had them stacked in there better. I mean, we've done good this time of year in years past, and this time it was just that much better. So
25 pounds in 2 days.
25, and there's a lot of fortune in that, and we all know that. I mean, we're all bass fishermen. I mean,
it's all timing and rotation.
Yeah, timing, rotation. The right cricket, right presentation, you want to give yourself that, at least the right bait and the right wiggle to the bait, if you would. But at the end of the day, it is some fortune to get some of them big fish. Yeah. But this is the time of year that the big fish come up,
right,
and feed. And they want, all of our fish were more bank related.
So they're coming up closer to the bank, not necessarily.
They're coming up from
all
where
the
they suspend off
to the backs of creeks. They're coming up closer to the bank.
It could be a point in the back of the creek. They'll suspend off the sides of them or off the heart of them and just sit there. And, they move up the feed. They move back and forth between that. But this time of year, they really get that area because their clock is ticking.
Yeah.
They know what they're going to go through here in a couple of weeks. They're going to go through the spawn, which really beats them up. And they don't eat a whole lot, so they know they got to feed up. And with the current running and all that stuff, it was just a recipe for a perfect case scenario for us, really. And we just benefited the most out of it. I know there was a lot of guys probably did the same thing that probably ended up with good bags, but like I said, the fortune part, we were able to catch some heavier fish.
Robbie, I want to exclude everybody, but these guys just caught 25 plus pounds 2 days in a row. So I kind of want to stick with you for just a minute, ahead. Robbie. Yeah. You mentioned the shoulders of points.
Yeah. Right.
What does that look like? What does that look like on your map? Mm-hmm. What does that look like visually? If if you can describe visually what that looks like, what does that look like? The shoulders of some.
So a shoulder of a point. So on Lake Master, I use Lake Master by Humminbird. I'm sure Garmin and Lowrance have the same kind of looking deal. You could tell what a point looks like. It could either be very rounded or it could be long tapering. And where it makes either its roundness or its V, where the contours are tightest, where the deep water comes into that point and it creates it makes it shallow. All of a sudden your contours get really wide, and that's the shallowest part of the point. They were on that kind of last deep water before they get up to the point. I'm not saying we didn't catch some on the point itself. Right. We did, but the bigger fish seem to be right on the shoulders. And I don't know if that's because of a current break, because what that'll do is it keeps them in and around the buffet line, but it also gives them a break. And when I say a break, I mean if they're right with their nose in the current on that flat point, they're fighting that current. Now, we didn't have super strong current, so I don't think that was, we had super current all week, like 35,000. So when you get 30 to 35,000, they'll set up on the current break. You know,
Right.
where they still feel it, but they get a little bit of like, I don't have to sit here and run the treadmill all day.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like me or you sitting there huffing and puffing, running all day, just jogging in place. They actually get on a little break spot where the buffet just goes right past them and they can feed. So the shoulders of those points create that current break where it's a perfect ambush point. Brush was, believe it or not, you know, a lot of people, everybody, Hollywood, you'll love this one. So everybody was like, so let me guess, you live scoped everyone. Not the case. I mean, we live scoped a handful of them, but everyone we live scoped was about this big.
Yeah.
The ones, I mean, we could see them ones in the shallower cover, but we refused to use it because what was working best for us is fishing the old-fashioned way. Don't look at that damn screen all day and just throw it where you know there's some shallow cover
Right.
or a laydown that comes out further in the lake. You
Right,
know,
yeah.
some kind of 5 foot, 6 foot, 7 foot to 9 foot piece of cover.
I was gonna ask
I
you.
will say that.
I was gonna ask
not
you
only
about that.
rock on the
Yeah.
shoulders of
Yeah.
those points. Rock is
Yeah.
a good, you know, structure piece. These fish always relate to cover. I mean, it's very rare to catch a fish that's aggressive up shallow that's not on a piece of something.
Right.
I mean, he's not just gonna, you know, unless he's sucking in some crawfish or whatever. But they were all on some kind of little piece of cover that they were sitting on.
Robbie, one last question, and then we'll let the rest of these guys. They're listening intently, by the way, because they want to catch. They want to catch what you guys caught this weekend.
These are all good anglers sitting at this table, and you're never too old to learn.
How important? How important was wind?
Wind was important. That's a good question, Bob. Or Dad, Bob, whatever you want to call it.
Call me whatever you want.
Just
Don't call me late for supper.
It is. You know, we noticed during Anglers in Action, it was crazy. So we had good southeast wind. It was south or southwest, I think it was, blowing. And then about 11 o'clock, the wind completely did a 180 and came out of the west. You know, and for a while, for those 2 hours where the wind was in its transition, that's such a good question. I noticed we weren't getting any bites. We already had a pretty good bag of fish early in the morning. On my scale, it was around 19 pounds. And then the wind shifted, went through a dry spell. So we decided to be like, look at our lake master, look at what banks are getting the wind, and go try them. The same kind of points, same kind of everything. And believe it or not, we ended up culling, once we decided to switch from where it wasn't working to play in the conditions. That's one thing I haven't gotten to yet, that, you know, I got so much to say, of course, because, you know, I've done this for so long down here, it seems like, and you got so much knowledge, you could tell somebody exactly what to do. It might not work for them, but playing the conditions in the spring is humongous. And when that wind shifted, we went and played that big wind and went and played all that wind. And it worked, and it wasn't nothing we practiced. It was just playing the freaking conditions and fishing from the bank out to about 8 or 9 yards.
Got it.
And then after that, usually if you did get a bite, it was a ding. The bigger ones were wanting to get shallow.
Robbie, final question, and I'm going to ask Michael to comment on everything that you said.
Yeah.
What baits were important to you this weekend?
So we tried. It was really 3 baits that we used. We tried the jerk, you know, we did the jerk bait. I kept the jerk bait on just these guys all fished the OMTT the week before. I was out of town,
Right.
and I saw what happened in that. A lot of jerk bait fish were caught
Right.
going shallow. My guys right here, these 2 right here, they had a humongous bag during that, you know,
Yeah.
I reckon all on the jerk bait. So we started off throwing the Alabama rig, which Ben was throwing the Alabama rig, I was throwing the jerk bait. And we caught keepers on both, but the Alabama rig was catching the bigger fish. So we transitioned to both throwing the A rig because we both love to throw.
Right.
I love to swim bait fish, and I consider the Alabama rig just a giant swim bait.
Right.
When they push slack in the line, it makes me get goosebumps all over.
Yeah.
From the ankles to the top. I mean, I just love throwing it. I love throwing any kind of swim bait, so that's what we ended up rocking with. But we did catch some fish on the hyper shad.
Yeah.
We got a glide bait in the shop with that big wind we had. Throwing that hyper shad up shallow worked too. And it's a glide bait. It's a 6-inch glide bait. And I think we caught one of one of the 10 weighers come on the hybrid set for the most part. Believe it or not, them 2.5 inch or 2.5 pounders and 3 pounders will bite that thing.
Yeah.
People think it's just a big fish bait. No, man, it's an all around bait.
Especially that size.
Especially that size, like Michael said.
6-7 inch size.
It's just perfect for our lake.
Yeah.
It's just and with wind and the conditions we had with them getting shallow, it's a more shallow water bait. It was just perfect. So we kept that honest all weekend.
Yeah.
But our main go-to was absolutely the Alabama rig with some Kitex on it with 3.8 swim baits on it.
Yeah,
Made by Kitex.
I would say one last question. I got two last questions.
Yeah, I'm sure you do.
And how are you working it from the bank out? Were you letting it sink to the bottom?
Yeah,
Were
no.
you just, and then
Reel that thing in.
also what part of the lake?
So retrieve is just a slower, as slow as a retrieve as you can have throwing it at the bank without getting it hung up. You still wanted to reel it slow, but there were spots that were so shallow that, you almost got to keep your rod tip. That 7.7 heavy fast from FX is the absolute one. It's the best rod for that thing that I've ever found. Harlan turned it on to me years ago, and it's become my bread and butter using it. I just want to give them a plug on that because period, end of story. It's the best Alabama rig rod ever freaking made. And two, throwing it up as shallow as we were, you wanted to hit the bank because I feel like the fish were looking at the bank from about that far away. So like if you landed here, you're gonna land on top of them, probably spook them off. So you land it here, keep the rod tip somewhat up, and as you bring that bait back, just lower the rod tip,
Right.
Kind of thing. And then, halfway back to the boat, if you're in 15 foot of water, then slow yourself down even more.
Right.
And that's what I tend to do a lot. Ben will kind of keep the same retrieve, but what I'll get to doing is kind of just pulling that thing along.
Right.
And really slow it down once I know I'm out of the hang-up
Right.
area. In area of the lake, to glaze the Shawnee Bend. Glaze the Shawnee Bend or a little bit past Shawnee Bend, and just running the same pattern all throughout that whole area, chasing the wind.
Both days.
Both days.
That's awesome.
Pretty much both days. I mean, it was fishing so good all in through there. I don't know where.
You probably could have went anywhere.
That's what I think. Like Michael's done this before. Everybody at this table's done this before. When you have them that dialed in and that kind of set up, as long as the conditions played right on the situation, you had great confidence you were going to catch one.
Michael and Austin, talk amongst yourself. Ask Robbie. Respond to what Robbie said right quick.
Yeah. So Rob, it's funny, we just had this conversation and Rob was talking about fishing the conditions in the spring.
Yep.
Austin and I just had this conversation today on the phone. We
just came from Table Rock. We weren't here this weekend, but
right,
that's
yeah.
where we struggle a little bit.
And that lake's even more intense about fishing the conditions.
Yeah.
It changes rapidly, but aside from Table Rock, I think regardless of where you go in the country, it is very important in the spring and the fall to fish the conditions. The fish are constantly moving, they're migrating, they're thinking about spawning, and so that they're constantly on the move, not necessarily daily, but hourly, by the minute. They're moving, they're getting ready to spawn, and you have to be on the spots that are right for the conditions.
Yeah, you can't go into it. You can have a plan go into it. You can practice all you want for this, but I think the way to look at practice as a starting point, and then be able to look at the conditions, and if they don't match what your practice did, you can't just go off your practice and expect to catch them. You've got to look at the current things that are happening and use those variables to try to find those fish. And that's what you guys did to be so successful.
Exactly. And what do you do in practice? You fish the conditions.
Yeah, and that's
you
what
catch them.
Yeah.
And then in the tournament comes, now all of a sudden you're like, well, I caught them here in practice. I got to go fish here.
But it don't
But
work.
the wind's blowing the other
it's not the
direction.
same thing.
So those fish were there feeding when the wind was right and the conditions were right for that spot. What you have to be able to do as an angler is recognize, okay, it's cloudy today and not sunny, so maybe that's a bait change or a color change, or two, the wind direction is switched or something. There's a cold front, and you may need to do that. You were fishing this side of the creek, and all you have to do is jump over here, and they're biting.
Wow.
But this side, it's a ghost town, and those fish are still around.
Or there's a cold front, you got to slow down,
Right.
or move to a steeper bank or something like that. There's all kinds of things you got.
Fishing the conditions is just absolutely the most important thing in the spring and the fall, in my opinion.
And don't be afraid to test in the tournament. I think that's got something
Right.
that guys get
Yeah.
so locked into the baits that they were using in practice and the baits that have always done well for them, and they're afraid to spend half an hour, testing a different bait or testing a different area or technique, and they might miss the fish by this much
Right.
because of that.
So Michael and Austin, a question for you. Based on what Rob described from doing well this weekend, doing very well this weekend, you guys doing very well last weekend, based on what you've heard from Rob, and I know you guys talked to Rob and all that kind of stuff, and you guys share information, what do you think, if anything, kind of changed within a week?
That's a good question.
I don't think that. So what basically my thoughts are, my theory is, and this I'm probably saying too much, but I think the bite works its way down the lake throughout the spring. And so what happens is you get these sections of lake where, the first week of March, up lake may be better. And then, the third week of March may be more of a mid-lake type bite. And as the water warms and everything moves along, the lower end is the last one that it hits, in my opinion.
Right.
So what I try and do is follow that bite down the lake. He's catching them on the same exact pattern that we caught them in the
Just a little further
OMTT.
down.
We just weren't throwing an A-rig. We were throwing a jerkbait on the same kind of spots. Exact same stuff.
Same stuff, but
further
up
up
around
the
maybe
lake.
Tantera,
And we
Hurricane
talked
Deck
about, hey, if we're
Bridge, stuff
fishing-
like that.
We talked about this weekend, hey, if we're fishing next weekend, we just got to follow that bite a little further
I
down
said
the
that
lake.
today.
Right,
We
yeah.
talked about that earlier.
Well, let me ask you guys this. So, okay. By the way, I wanted to show you guys that. I barely made it.
Oh, man. Didn't make it, it looks
I
like.
still had half to go. I was like waiting for Robbie to stop.
I didn't even notice until you said
I'm just giving you guys something to have some fun
That's
with.
pretty funny.
Sorry about some Bob members. I ain't gonna share with you what that was all about.
Gotta keep that in-house.
So anyway, so, okay, yeah, there's some big bags caught up in an Angua, some big bags caught up in, the Osage. You guys caught them up, whatever it was, like Hurricane Deck to, wherever you guys were fishing in OMTT. And yeah, it moves down, but it's not like those big fish in those areas left,
No,
right?
not at all.
But
We're
are
just
you talking
following
about,
that bite.
you're following that bite,
Specific
and
bite.
Because it's
are they
so-
perhaps
it's-
more like fresh fish that might be more
It's
aggressive?
Exactly.
Exactly what Rob had said about the dinner line, or what did you say?
The buffet line.
buffet line. That buffet line bite is the best bite on Lake of the Ozarks.
Right.
Through the entire year.
They're fresh, they're predictable, and they're willing to bite.
And they're
And you always
just
wonder
blowing up.
if that current, several times a year, how it affects them, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because there's your June bite, there's your fall bite, there's all kinds of different, right, where the fish should be.
Yeah.
But I'm telling you right now, when they run water like they ran, and Steve, you've been here a long time, you've done this a long time, you can probably attest to that. It does affect them.
Yeah.
It affects them, I don't care what season it is, that current, they feel that current, and they know when that's on at least long enough,
Yeah,
where to assemble at for the buffet.
right. And what are your thoughts on that, Steve?
Well, that's exactly right. Whenever there's current, like in a river system, fish bite based upon the current, and they shut off when it's slack.
Is
like
it
that.
a certain time of year? Will they bite in current during the winter time, or do they want to hide from it in winter time?
Well, obviously, they bite in the current early.
Yeah,
I mean,
Well,
coming
this
from
is April.
Robbie and
Yeah.
Ben, we figured that out.
Yeah.
But we all do it in the summertime.
Right,
We
yeah.
rely on that current.
I just still think it affects them too. I've learned it really opened my eyes this weekend because we caught them the way that we caught them in years past, but I think they were stacked in there better because of the current.
It's a change in their environment, so
Right.
they're gonna notice.
Yeah.
I think there's a large population of fish that are out too because they drop the lake so fast and so hard that just a small portion of them are moving shallow. Well, I know this because I'm not catching them shallow, and I'm usually catching the heck out of them shallow this time of year.
yeah.
And when I'm talking shallow, I'm talking 3 feet or less.
Right.
So.
Towards the backs of creeks or
Yeah,
points?
exactly, and the fish seem to be out a little bit further than
Right.
that,
On a pinch point.
right, on points or at the mouths of creeks and stuff like that. So, I mean, the water did come up to 755.5, and then they dropped it a foot.
Yeah,
So, and they keep doing that. I noticed that this morning, the water was down just a little bit
Yeah.
too, so.
yeah, that water was rising this weekend on me and Jack on Saturday. And we were catching them close to the bank, and now we start moving off the bank a little bit, start catching them a little better.
The water's coming out of Truman on early in the week, so they're letting it go out of Truman Monday, Tuesday, and then Wednesday, Thursday, they start heading out of this dam here.
Yeah.
So that's why we're seeing a lot of current going later in the week. But Truman's filling the lake up, and then Bagnell's letting it out.
Right.
So,
I do have one more thing to add to kind of that, now that it popped in my head. We had some cold mornings, and this could very well happen to these guys in the bash. You know, we had some colder mornings. Both mornings, you know, I had a lot of clothes on because,
it
you
was
know,
20
colder.
degrees that way.
Even though it's getting the 70s, you know, in the afternoon or 60s or whatever, the fish in the morning were in them same kind of spots that I'm talking about, but they were a little bit further off the bank.
Right.
And
And I-
moving slower.
And moving
That's
slower.
where I could see the
And
jerk bait being better.
a
It's
little
early.
a little lethargic, but we had, you know, on Saturday, we had good wind, and they bit in the morning really good. They were just further off the bank, but we had overcast conditions and wind.
Right.
You know, Sunday morning, it was even colder with no wind.
Right.
So it was a little slower, they were a little further off the bank, but as soon as Big Red gets to shining, they know they want to be up there shallow. I've seen it many a times, and they, as it progresses, the day progresses on, they just get closer and closer and closer to the bank. They're within the bank's reach in the morning, even though it's cold, you know, backed off maybe, but they are right back up there, you know, come noon. And that's what you're gonna see coming into the Big Bass Bash here, and, you know, the tackle box is gonna be wide open. A lot's gonna change between now and the Big Bass Bash. It always
0
does.
minus 17
like Michael
days.
said earlier, the fish are constantly moving, gotta play, and you're still gonna have to do the same things we're talking about. Play the conditions.
Right.
All the way up until and beyond the Big Bass Bash. Play the freaking conditions, play the wind, and maybe even, I guess if we're talking Big Bass Bash pointers, try to do something a little bit different maybe. Maybe a different bait or
Well, to
even-
go along with that, I think there's different groups of fish, like Bob said
Yeah,
earlier.
yeah.
The fish he's catching, they're going to be further along than those fish that are behind them.
Yeah.
You know, that bite's going to keep going because there's going to be more waves that want to keep coming up.
Right.
So, you know, during the Big Bass Bash, will there be fish on bed? Absolutely. There's going to be fish that probably have spawned a little bit. You know, maybe not a lot, but there'll be some, along with fish that haven't even pulled up yet.
Yeah.
They're going to spawn all the way through May, like Dion's been saying every week, and so that's going to allow you to target different groups of fish, whether you want to get up shallow and flip or throw a square bill and a spinnerbait, or you want to target those more staging type fish with a jerk bait or an A-rig or a big swim bait or something like that. That time of year, like Robbie said, the tackle box is wide open, and it could be one on any of them.
Yeah.
So, you know, we're talking about catching fish staging right now, but that may be different, or it may be the same. It may be just a different part of the lake.
Yeah.
You know,
Well said.
there is all kinds of fish to be caught, regardless of what we say. You could just show me any lure in your
Yeah.
tackle box, and you could go catch one.
That 12-inch old monster guy. I mean, that can hold you. I mean,
Yeah.
you say so right. Michael hit it right on the head. Like, I mean, we're talking about the fish that are wanting to pull up shallow. And Steve even kind of commented on that a minute
That's
ago.
5% of the
There's
fish.
so many fish that are still sitting out there suspended that aren't ready to go do that.
Right, yeah.
You know, you're exactly right. I mean, and you could try to fish for those fish, but typically you want to fish for maybe not in the Big Bass Bass.
The
but in
easy-
a
the
team tournament.
easier
You
ones.
want to fish for the aggressive ones that are up there to
And
feed.
that's why we're
instead
chasing
of
that
trying to
bite.
crack the crow to the ones out there suspended because
yeah.
that's a lot harder of a code to crack.
Yeah.
You know.
Joe, let me ask you a question. Something that's always on my mind, you know, again, we're 0 minus 17, so we're not gonna know. Let's see what you do. 0 minus 17, 17 days. There's plenty of time for us to get rain, snow, sleet, cold fronts, all that kind of stuff. As we're moving towards the Big Bass Bash, I want to ask you a question. What are the type of, you know, these guys are talking about conditions. What are the type of conditions that are probably more top of mind for you as you're preparing for the Big Bass Bash. Obviously, we got some great input from this pro panel. Clear water versus dirty waters versus slightly stained water, backs of creeks, main lake, wind, no wind, that kind of thing. What are water temperature? What are the things that you're kind of keying? I'm going to come back and ask you that same question, Steve, so prepare your answer. What are the things that you're kind of keying on? 0 minus 17, tomorrow 0 minus 16, then 0 minus 15 as we get closer to the Big Bass Bash.
Sure. Well, I think Rob did an excellent job of breaking down what he was looking for in a point.
Right.
And I think every person listening out there can think of 10 to 100 points that they know that kind of maybe fit that description, that maybe it can help them approach differently. And to me, that's a staging spot, whether it's pre-spawn or those fish probably use those same points and areas in the post-spawn. You may have if you're watching the weather and we get a warming trend, maybe you have a good pre-spawn point or area where you usually catch fish early. Kind of like Dion mentioned, look for that adjacent place. Maybe it's the back of a little pocket next to it. Maybe that pea gravel point's covered with docks. Maybe you want to go more, flip the back of the docks with a creature bait or something that's more of a spawn-oriented technique if we get a big warming trend. I remember Justin Swast. I think he caught the winning fish on a Carolina rig.
Carolina with a swamp bug.
Congregator, baby.
I'll never forget
Those
that.
flatter points that kind of
But
Rob was
also,
describing.
yeah.
That's a great Carolina rig area if a guy likes to fish like that. So I think, they've done a great job, obviously, looking at current and how that plays into how their fish position. So I'd say watch the Ameren lake levels, watch the weather forecast. They're going to be somewhere around those staging spots, and that may change as far as section of the lake. If you were up lake and you had a dirtier water clarity, I'd lean more towards maybe a big spinnerbait, a crankbait, something that is a little bit more of a dirty water technique and a little shallower, where they were in the kind of the lower end, Glaze, the Shawnee Bend. You got a little bit better water clarity. If we get cold conditions kind of like we got, an A-rig is going to be a great thing to throw. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, A-rig, a big swim bait, all the stuff Rob mentioned, if a guy had the right spinner bait, it sounds like that may have worked in that conditions.
Yeah.
So I think sticking around those staging areas, and maybe adjusting based on the weather, water level. If we got a big rain, you could see some fish with some rain and warming temps moving to the backs of those pockets.
Right.
So, start paying attention to that weather.
So don't be too afraid of dirty water too,
Absolutely
right?
not.
If we get
Absolutely
some big rains before them, don't be afraid of the
That's the
dirty
time of
water.
year we hunt it down.
Yeah,
The lake's really pretty darn clear right now.
yeah, it is. Right.
So get on up there.
Joe, is there a water temperature where you feel like the A-rig is kind of like, okay, let's put down the A-rig and pick up a spinner bait or a big creature bait or
Absolutely.
crankbait or something like that? I mean, is there a time when, like, these guys were catching them shallow on the A-rig? How long does that go on?
I think when you start getting up into in my experience, and these guys may have a different answer, but that mid to upper 50s, when it gets above 55 and you've got a full moon at some point in April, they're thinking about spawning. A lot of times the reaction bite gets a little tricky. I'd search out that 50 to mid 50s, that true pre-spawn bite.
Right.
I've fished this tournament a whole bunch of times way up in the river, and what I think happens, and I could be completely crazy, but I think we always get those really warm days,
Right.
and those creeks are 3 to 5 foot deep. I think those bigger fish go in there and spawn early, and then they're gone. Because I've caught many 20 to 22 pound bags up there, which don't really do you any good in the Big Bass Bash. They're fun to catch.
Well, there's big.
They're check fish.
There's big
They're
ones.
check fish,
I mean,
but
2019, I think, or 2018, way up the river, dirty water. The guy's name was Bob something. Had the winning.
Bob Newman.
Bob Newman. That's right. And had the winning fish up there. on a spinnerbait, big thumper blade,
Yep.
Big buffalo.
big buffalo, 7-pounder.
One of my good buddies had 26 pounds on a buzzbait
Yeah.
last year.
Wow.
Out the
Yeah.
river.
And so I get,
I'm just struggling.
Yeah.
I think those way high creeks, if they
Yeah.
get too warm, I think the fish transition more into,
Quickly.
the majority of the fish are more post-spawn.
right,
Where I think if you stay down, maybe even where Michael was mentioning, or the Bollinger Creek area, you're
Yeah.
more likely to maybe have some more fish that are in the pre-spawn.
yeah,
Because let's face it, if you could catch a 6-pounder that spawned out and that fish was 7.5,
right, yeah,
you know,
Not
a
gonna
couple
do
days
any good.
ago.
yeah,
So I would try to
Check.
lean towards an area where you think there's more pre-spawn fish,
got it, makes
Just-
sense.
catching that big fish that's full of eggs that weighs a whole bunch.
That's what leads me down the swim bait road. Because you're catching most of the pre-spawn fish when
Right.
it comes to that. So it's a
And,
good way to target.
swim bait versus, A-rig or something like that?
I just think a swim bait in general through April or so is going to catch you more pre-spawn fish than post-spawn fish or spawning fish.
And where are you gonna throw that swim bait? A secondary point, a main lake point,
Yeah, points. The
just-
most obvious stuff on the whole lake.
yeah,
Docks, points, everything.
yeah. Steve, I said I was gonna come back to you on this, so let me just throw that same question out that I just threw out to Joe as it relates to over the zero minus 17 days to 15 days to 14 days to 12 days till we do this again next week. What are the things that you would be paying most attention to in terms of conditions, in terms of like Robbie talked about, current, staying up to date with what the current's gonna be, trying to stay up to date as most as you can from bassandbob.com or wherever, in terms of water clarity, cold fronts, versus warm fronts. What are the things that you would kind of be wanting to pay attention to now that might start cluing you into, I'm getting ready to fish the big bass bash? Or is it too early?
No, not really, because here's the thing, is the moon phase is gonna be a big factor in this, okay? And as far as conditions and lake level and all that stuff goes, you can pretty much check Bass and Bob or my fishing report or whatever, and be able to gauge that before the tournament.
Which, by the way, this is Steve Wilson for you Bass and Bob members, that you read his weekly fishing report every week. He does a great job, and he's on top of it, and everybody loves your report,
Well,
Steve,
thank
so,
you.
yeah.
But if I'm not right, I believe the full moon's coming in right at that third week,
Right,
okay?
yeah,
If the water stays semi-low like it is, say 655, okay? And it's clarity like we got right here, it's gonna be like the perfect storm. You're gonna have a big wave of big fish move shallow with that first full moon to spawn, okay? And you're gonna have males go up behind the docks and set up shop. And I do a lot of sight fishing, and I see females. I don't necessarily target females, okay? Because when I'm in a tournament, I'm looking for big males and trying to catch them. But when
why is that?
they're easier to catch.
And they stay there.
Yeah,
Really?
and they're more aggressive. I'm looking, the females are pretty shy.
Yeah.
They like to hang back on whatever covers there.
Right, there's a dock.
They're almost
sitting on the
impossible.
float.
Docks,
Yeah.
a lot of docks. You'll see them, and I'm talking bigger fish than you normally ever catch on Lake of the Ozarks.
Right,
You're like,
yeah.
I can't believe that's
That's
there.
a giant over there.
Yeah, but she ain't touching nothing. You'll see her poke her head out like this and then come right back under that dock. So she's waiting to go into that nest, whether it be, at night or whatever, that happens. But she's there. So knowing that she's there, I'm gonna go around and see where all the males are located. And then I'm gonna figure that the females are gonna be in the first cover, which is most likely a shallow dock. So, and I'm gonna back off in the big bass bash. I'm not gonna fish for that male. I'm gonna back off, I'm gonna throw a swim bait at that dock. So I'm gonna try.
Alongside of it, or in front of it, or?
I'm gonna
in
throw
the- in the
I'm gonna
well?
Throw to the side and then get to the back and throw to the back side.
Got it.
But I wanna make my first cast at a distance to the side. But really, that back corner would be important. And what I wanna do is bring that bait by her without her ever knowing I'm there, not hearing nothing, not seeing nothing, and then getting her to react to that.
Are you letting it sink to the bottom, or are you are you thinking it's probably just suspending under the foam?
Well, the foam is there and she's right underneath.
Got it.
Okay, so I want the bait right about her eye level.
Right,
So
got it.
that gets it as close as it can to her.
Right.
So she doesn't have to swim very far. Fat girls don't go fast. So, and basically, I'm just wanting to get it close to maybe she sees it and thinks, I need to eat a little something before I go, you know.
Right.
And if you get that fish to bite, you're in good shape.
And, about what depth of water would your boat be in when you check that pattern?
Well, that's gonna be different depending on
Where you're at.
That dock could be over 35 foot.
Yeah, or you could be sitting in
Because
5
they're
foot.
spawning behind it still.
Right.
So
Right.
it's just the next bit. It's just the next thing out that they can hide.
They spawn.
Well,
in
that doesn't
a
give me
lot of
enough
different
information. They
spots.
don't let me fish it, but hell, I may be fishing a tournament sometime soon. I'd like to
also
know.
take a big jig and flip it back in them wells, at the very back of them wells, and at the very back of the actual dock right there to see
Yeah.
if I can fit like that. But I really wanna back off that with a swim bait to see if I can't get that fish to bite. Now granted, I see these fish all the time when I sight fish, and I think about doing that. But in tournaments, I target that fish that I know I can catch, you
Right.
know, that male. And there'll be males big enough to cash hourly checks on
Yeah,
beds. Males get pretty big. And so you can do your hourlies and big bass in the same place. You just switch that lure up to catch that.
How do you tell if it's a male or female?
Usually by the way it's behaving on the bed.
Absolutely.
You cannot really actually tell unless you cut that fish open,
Yeah.
you know, and you're a biologist and you know.
Well,
what
we
you're
know, well, you kinda know just by,
Like you said,
like
behavior.
you said,
Yeah,
their
their
behavior.
behavior's totally
The male's gonna stay there and do his thing, and the female's only there to lay her eggs, and then she dips out.
Right.
I mean, and she might lay underneath that dock that she just spawned behind, but for the most part, that male's gonna be around there. A lot of times when people say they're sight fishing, they're catching males almost 95% of the time, I would say. If you're only so lucky to catch that big female while she's up there, I tip my hat to you, you know?
Yeah,
Because
females
that
aren't
doesn't
very
happen
good
very
parents
often.
when it comes to bass. So they like to eat, do their job, and get out there. As a matter of fact, they eat him if he's too small.
Right, I believe that.
I mean,
She might hit him, after it's all said and done, she might take a swipe at him.
Austin,
Funny
you,
as
you,
shit.
you pulled a few, rods out with some bait?
Yeah, what
Ta-
Steve was saying.
Talk to us about that.
Steve was saying
Thank you, Steve.
exactly
That's
what
what's up.
I target this time of, or the time of year that the bash is happening. I think there's a way underrated way to try to catch them and to separate yourself from the field, because everyone's throwing a spinner bait, everybody's throwing a crankbait, and everyone's flipping a jig, right?
Right.
There's gonna be 3 ways most people fish this. A way I love to try to target fish that time of year, especially big females sitting up under the docks, is with a chatterbait. So exactly what he's talking about, those big females suspended sitting underneath that back float waiting to go up. You take that chatterbait, you roll it by, you can get a chatterbait in places you can't get anything else but a jig. You know, you can't, or vibrating jig, chatterbait, yeah. And yeah, this particular one, this is probably the best color. This is a motion seeker. And
I'm trying to find you here, but.
okay,
Stick with me,
Can you
guys.
guys- can you guys see it?
Sweet.
Got
Yeah.
it.
So this is the motion seeker, and
Wow, I love it.
yeah, it's a bluegill imitation bait. It's got that blue head. It's got a flashy blade, and I put a little Tight Lines UV swim bait on the back of it, and I even put a little chartreuse on there. I mean, it emulates a bluegill perfectly. They hate bluegills this time of year. Absolutely hate them, because this is what's going to eat their fry, and this
Wow.
is actually called fried chaser.
Wow.
So pre-spawn and post-spawn, if those big females are around, you throw that around the dock. You can skip this thing underneath the walkway, the cables, the dock, the actual dock itself. Fish at any depth you want, and you can catch them. I mean, and they absolutely bite it. And I think it's a really
Motion.
this is motion. So motion fishing.
Roberts?
Yeah, this is Bobby Roberts. So what I like about it, I mean, this is a pretty unique one. It's got a really flat head on it.
Yeah.
And so it skips really, really good, and then it actually hunts really, really good back and forth in the water. So you can find these on motionfishing.com, and actually
shoot, I might
soon to
have
be.
Fitz fishing,
yeah,
Fitz
yeah,
fishing better.
Well, I carry
Fitz-
his jigs, but I'll get his
Fitz
chatterbaits.
better
Yeah,
get
you
a
know,
few of
get
them.
a few of these.
Talk to
Here's
me. I
the-
know you have a lot of
Here's
Here's the
chatterbaits
red
there
one
today.
here. This is something I would cover water with. So this would be right around those docks, right? This
Okay,
is something
because
I
of the
would do.
bluegill color.
Bluegill color, yeah. You're trying to get those big females. If you like to fish shallow and bang around in the back of the creeks, this one's a great one for doing that. This is their fire crawl.
A little dirtier water.
A little dirtier water usually, and it imitates a crawfish really well. And so I'm going to be throwing this on those transitions.
And let it
this
sink
is-
to the bottom and then
Fishing
start
closer
reeling
to
it
the
back?
Fishing close to the bank, around cover, letting
Yeah.
it sink, 3 to 5 foot of water all the way to
Right.
the bank.
I'm just trying to put this places I think maybe one staging up or already on a bed.
Right.
Roll this around and cover a little bit more water with it.
Right.
They're going to see a ton of spinnerbaits. They're going to see a ton of jigs. They're going to see a ton of crankbaits. They are not going to see as many chatterbaits.
Right.
I mean, 0%, you know, that they see as many chatterbaits as they do a spinnerbait. It makes a totally different vibration, and this can, you know, really piss one off. So I think that's a great lure to do it.
That's awesome, man. That's great stuff, Austin. I noticed you have that rigged up on what kind of reels? And I noticed you got those hooked, or kind of hooked up and throwing that very, very extremely popular
Yeah. So
FX
This
Angler
is-
Series
yes,
rods.
this is the rods that all three of us are sponsored by. They are absolutely dynamite rods. This is FX Series, Extreme Series, and you can get them at Fitz's. You can get them at Tombstone in Columbia. This is the 7-1 medium heavy.
That's a super versatile.
Yeah,
rod.
it's an all around awesome
What
rod.
is it, a 7 foot?
7-1 medium heavy.
7-1 medium heavy.
Yep, and I like it for flipping a jig. I like it for flipping a Texas rig, and I love it for throwing a chatterbait.
Good
And a spinnerbait. I mean, it really is a versatile rod. If you're looking for an all-around rod you can throw.
Yeah.
That's
This
the
FX
most
rod.
versatile.
Hands down.
Honestly, any rod company,
you
a
can
7
flip.
foot
I
medium
bet you. I
heavy.
bet you can flip creature baits and
what I do.
skip,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
all that stuff
I've got
around
a
docks.
ton of these because I use them for so many different techniques.
You can stop by
It
and
is.
stop by and see Robbie
Yeah.
at
We got them at the
Fitz-
Camden location and the PB2 location, and we're usually, I mean, they're pretty good about turning around. That's one thing
Yep.
I love about FX is you're not waiting for your order. It comes right in.
And if you're in the Columbia area, check out Tombstone Tackle up there.
Exactly.
They're
Adam will
gonna
take good care
Yeah,
of you
Adam will
up
take
there.
good care of you, and I'm always up there too if you guys
Cool.
need anything. So.
All right. Well, gosh darn, guys.
I think the great thing, Bob, to
I
add
think
to
we're
that
just
is,
giving up so much information. It's like awesome.
you know, when you walk into, you got Ben and Rob work at separate stores, but you've got the team that weighed almost 52 pounds of fish. You know, it's a good local tackle store. You know, I went in there today, and we're going to get more into the baits
Yeah.
and tackle in the next upcoming weeks. But, you know, they had a 10-aught and 12-aught swim bait hooks. You know, some of these swim baits that we're going to talk about later more in depth, you need the specialty tackle.
Right.
And the stores are ran by fishermen.
Yeah.
And that makes a big difference.
Yeah.
Because they know the tackle that you need because they do it. They just
Right.
want. So, you know, Fitz Fishing, if you guys are in the area for the tournament, make sure you stop there.
Yeah.
You know, they've got some good glide baits, these big hard swim baits we're talking about. They've got them, and, you know, they're all friends. They do a great job. We like supporting them. So do make it a point to
And they're
We
honest.
appreciate
They're
that.
honest. You guys are all
Joe,
honest.
I
I
really
mean,
do, and we're honest. You know, we wear it on a sleeve. We got all the cool stuff like Joe said, but all the way down to your brush hogs. You know, if you've never fished a brush hog, I'd be more than happy to set you up with how you need to, you know, what you need: rod and reel, line, the beast hooks like Joe said.
crappie
You know,
stuff.
crappie stuff. Yeah, your
My dad doesn't even bass fish anymore. He goes in there, he's all excited. He got a raccoon safe crappie thing.
Yeah.
And then Rob
Well,
looked
there's a lot of
of.
there's a lot of otters in the lake that's
Yeah.
been getting a lot of people's crappie. You know, so what we carry is a steel cage where them otters aren't going to have no love getting into that steel cage.
That's cool. That's
and
good
I
stuff.
sold Bob one, but you know we have a lot of the right stuff to catch them on Lake of the Ozarks, not only here but anywhere. I got. You know, we got up to the coolest stuff here, and I got even the cooler stuff from my man Mike. You know, Mike works there once a week. I'm fortunate to have him, and he stays up on all the
buys
hottest
it all.
new stuff. Like he looks up on the stuff that me and Ben used to look up before we had to worry about getting brush hogs. Like now, me and Ben are worried about getting the brush hogs, and Harlan's looking for the new hot.
now it's like,
hard
get some of these chatterbaits.
So yeah, exactly. Like, and he held out on me on that. So I'm gonna let him hear about it when we send the video up. You know, Hollywood Harlan didn't tell me about none of this, neither did Cole. So we're gonna have a little talking to at the end. And what's sad about that is I do carry Motion Fishing's jigs, and they're great jigs, and I sell a lot of them. Little did I know that my boys are over here throwing this one. So
They'll probably be there by the bash.
they will be there by the bash,
We'll get
and
you
these
some.
boys are gonna be like, "Dang it, we let that one run." No, I'm just kidding.
Well,
You know,
they can't fish the bash.
Like I said, at Fitz Fishing, with having Harlan and even Culberson's advice for everything, it helps us run our tackle store. Joe and Steve, you know, all of us down here at the lake between Boatwrx, all these other companies, we all work together. to try to make all the ships rise, right?
Right, love it.
And we are, and including Bass and Bob, of course, me working at Bass and Bob, I try to help all the average fishermen catch more fish. So if I got the time, definitely. I mean, I get busy sometimes dipping a lot of minnows for people, you know, and I don't get as much one-on-one time. But if I got that one-on-one time with you, I will be there at your helm. You know, I will set you up any way that you would want to get set up. So
Good deal.
make sure you come see us all.
Guys, I'm going to come around the table and ask one final question, but before I do that, and members, you want to hang on for my one final question. So don't go away, but I want to just check with Joe real quick. Joe, what are the things as it relates to boats, boat maintenance, things that you can do here at Boatwrx to assist these anglers? I think you're still doing some, demo rides on Fridays. Tell us a little bit about Boatwrx. You're right here in Osage Beach, just a couple miles from PB2.
Absolutely. We typically, that day before the bash, we kind of try to have spots open for emergency service. You know, if you have emergency problems, we do the best we can to get you back out on the water. We do have a jerkbait only tournament this Friday. So we're gonna do some demo rides in conjunction to that. We've been doing them from 1 to 4. We're probably gonna extend it. We haven't decided the hours because the tournament's on a Friday. So yes, it is on a Friday. That's not a typo.
So this coming Friday, guys, what times take off on the
7 o'clock.
7 o'clock, weigh in
Sign
at
up at the
3,
ramp.
PB2,
PB2,
stick bait only tournament.
stick bait
Awesome
only.
tournament.
That's a lot of fun.
Yep, gonna be a fun tournament. You know, you talked about maybe some maintenance coming up to the Big Bass Bash. You know, make sure your live wells are working. Sounds simple. Batteries, make sure, trolling motor's working. Lights, the nice thing about that tournament is you can get out, get to your spot at, I believe, 6:30 is starting
Right,
time.
yeah.
Make sure your lights are working. Be safe. New impeller, your general maintenance, spare prop, trolling motor and big motor.
Yeah.
Try to have everything, and that's good advice from the beginner to the professional.
Right.
Try to have those backups that if you do have a problem, that it doesn't totally ruin your day.
I don't mean to put you on the spot with this question, but, cause I know you guys always will help out the anglers, but, and of course, like I said, we're 0 minus 17.
Yep.
So don't wait until the Friday before the Big Bass Bash. So get this stuff checked out, done. Come on down to the lake, pre-fish. Bring your boat by to
Mention
Boatwrx.
Bass and Bob, 10% discount.
10% discount if you mention Bass and Bob. Is there like a preventive maintenance? Is there like a preventive maintenance springtime kind of package or something that you guys offer that guy comes in and says, you know what? I haven't run this thing since the fall of the last Big Bass Bash or whatever.
I'd say
you
that's
can do?
tailored towards each individual's boat.
Okay.
Steve mentioned an impeller in your scenario.
Right.
If you haven't run the boat in a while, impeller, new gear lube, that kind of, if we drain that out and it looks good, well, your lower unit's probably okay.
Yeah.
If it's milky, we may need to, investigate and hopefully find find the problem before it becomes a big problem.
Got it. And you have a lot of certified mechanics here, but I would still encourage everybody, again, we're 0 minus 17. So, call, schedule, see what dates and times work the best. So it doesn't inhibit you from actually doing what you want to do here in terms of pre-fishing. And a lot of these services just don't take a lot of time,
You're better
but
off
can save you a lot of time on
the
fishing
day
day.
before the Big Bass Bash. Don't fish. Make sure your stuff works right.
Right,
You're
exactly.
better off spending that time doing that.
Appreciate it, Joe. All right, so like I said, I promised one last question around the table. So, Joe, one location of the lake, one bait that you'd have in your hand most of the day, and what will be your backup bait? And again, we don't know the conditions completely yet.
That's tough.
I would say
Question.
what I would do or what I think is going to win.
Well, obviously, these guys want to win.
I would do.
But there's a lot of ways to win with
Yep.
8 payout periods, hell, I'd be happy with $1,500 per payout period. There, you know, shit,
I would
that's,
fish from Tantera to, I'm gonna call it the 40-mile marker. So that, Tantera to Hurricane Deck, up a little bit from there. A big spinner bait or swim bait, and then a big creature bait or a big jig. So that's kind of 4 things.
in that area of the lake because of big fish or because it's a comfort area for you?
I think you're gonna have the right combination of water temperature and water clarity.
Perfect. Austin, what do you think, bud?
I guess if I were to give some advice before that, I would say fish your strengths. So that being said, you know, if you're comfortable going shallow, maybe I'd find a little bit dirty water. If you like fishing out a little deeper, go up near the dam. I personally,
And when you say shallow, you talking about in a Baxter Creek shallow or on a bank shallow?
just on a bank shallow, but in the backs of creeks too. I mean, that's something I grew up doing and I love to do. And if I were to go do this again, that's how I'd want to win it. I'd
Yeah.
want to win it rolling in the back of a creek with a
Doing it your
chatterbait,
way.
doing it my way. You know, not the way I have to do to win tournaments. I
Right.
want to do it. I want to do it this way, either with a chatterbait or flipping a big jig, flipping a big brush hog, rolling a big spinnerbait, something like that. I'd find a little bit dirtier water in him, so I'd probably go Bollingering up, get away from some of the people, get in some of that skinny water, and look around for a big one. It's just what I love to do and what I
Love
grew
it.
up doing. So.
Good stuff, Austin. Thank you so much. Michael?
So if I was gonna fish the Bash and try to win, I'm gonna go lower end for a few reasons. I think that your biggest population of fish lives there. There's a lot of very, very quality fish in that area of the lake. And the baits that I'm gonna go, and when I say lower end, I'm talking like Toll Bridge to the dam is what I would consider lower end. You could even call that like the Shawnee Bend area to the dam, but anywhere in between. And I'm gonna go my 2-prong approach, kind of what Steve said earlier. I'm gonna mix in sight fishing with like a 1/2 ounce crocodigator zapper jig and some kind of a bluegill pattern, like a magic craw. Definitely something you're gonna want is some chartreuse dye. Regardless of what bait you're putting it on, what soft plastic you're putting it on is an absolute fantastic bluegill emulator. So I'm gonna go a 1/2 ounce crocodigator jig. Magic craw is probably my go-to. Trailer of your choice, probably some type of a bluegill imitator. My favorite is probably a Strike King structure bug, which you can also buy in Magic Craw or Green Pumpkin or anything along those lines. Dip the tails in chartreuse. I'm going to use that to sight fish and try and pluck off some big fish and maybe, you know, get your money back. You may not catch the winning fish off a bed, but I guarantee you can find check fish. So maybe pay for your trip, and then after that, and as I'm looking, I'm going to go 8-inch mag draft, whiteback shad. I've caught a lot of really, really big fish on that bait through the month of April.
The big swim bait.
Yeah, that's a big 8-inch.
We weren't even going to say that.
8-inch mega bass, mag draft, swim bait, whiteback shad, and I'm gonna mix in, like Steve said, around those docks and areas. Maybe if I had seen one earlier, I'll come back and target it. And I'm also gonna fish really, really windy, anything that's got the most wind I can find. I mean, it's never enough.
Whether it's main lake or the back or a
Doesn't
secondary point.
Doesn't matter.
Got it.
Yeah, it could be blowing 25.
Round docks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It could be blowing 25 and I'd be asking for more. And it's not fun. It's not fun until that thing goes like that, and then it's fun.
And you catch that
So,
giant.
you know.
Never been an
By the
8
time
pound.
you get on the wide well, you're washed up on the bank.
Oh yeah, your boat's crashing. We were crashing the other day trying to catch a fish. So you know.
Never been an 8 pounder caught yet in the big bass bass.
I'll go out on a limb and say there will be this year.
2 years
Yeah,
ago,
I
a
kind
se-
of thought
a-
he was going to say 8-pounder.
Yeah.
I was
2
surprised.
years ago a 793.
Jamie had a
2 years
7.
before that a 796.
Yeah.
Never an 8 pounder,
They're
Robbie.
turning out right now. There's
Yeah.
big
Yeah,
fish
a
being
lot.
caught.
We've seen a lot
Hey,
of
I
7
get 2
pounders.
baits to choose, you said?
I said, yeah, pick an area of the
Well,
lake.
wow.
Pick your primary bait that you have in your hand most of the day.
Man, I'll tell you
An
what.
area of the lake and some kind of a pattern.
Well, Michael said from the Toll Bridge to the dam, I'm gonna expand that from the glaze to the dam.
Okay.
You know, I wouldn't go
Like the
that.
lower,
That's mainly
like the
'cause-
lower glaze. I mean,
Mainly
He added
comfortability,
he
but
added 3 miles.
that's the area of the lake I know the best. The glaze is the backyard. When
Yeah,
I first
oh,
moved
yeah.
down here with
Yeah.
my dad.
And
that's
how many 7-pounders are in there now?
There's a lot of them.
There's a lot more.
So,
About 10
and the
more.
glaze
like
does get a lot
Dion
of
Hibden
pressure
says,
because
man.
of it, but
When I asked him, I interviewed Dion Hibden, or I'm sorry, Guido Hibden a few years ago. Sorry to cut you off, Rob. And we were having a similar type of roundtable. He said, I want to go out of the glaze.
Yeah.
He said that's a fish
No, I
hatchery
agree.
for big fish.
I agree with him,
But,
at
but
some
you're gonna
point
have a
it
lot of
gets-
fishing pressure
It
too.
gets, that's what I was just gonna say. At some point, the glaze gets frustrating because there's, Frank, Dewey, and Louie is all in there too, I mean, but it only takes one big fish. You're just fishing for one big fish, so you can pull up a piece of ground anywhere,
Yeah.
play the conditions like we all talked about, and possibly, because there's gonna be fish moving up to spawn, fish in pre-spawn, and fish not even thinking about spawning yet.
Robbie, looking at
At
my
that time of year.
research from the last several years, the biggest fish over the last several years, other than a fall one, was not one in the glaze.
I believe that. But could it happen? Absolutely.
Yeah.
It could happen anywhere from dam to dam on this
Right.
lake.
Yeah.
So I hate to say it like that, but I would. I mean, that's not that far if you really think about it. You got 2 days
Right,
from the glaze to the dam.
right.
That's really, covering the wind, covering your conditions. And I would have to go, I would have to say it's been, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, the glide bait won 4 of the 5 places, if not 5 of the 5. And we're selling those hyper sheds now, and it really opened my eyes to how they bite it. That'd be a good bait to keep in your hand
I was
all
gonna
day
ask,
long.
I was
both
gonna
days.
ask you about
I
the
would
hyper
keep
shed.
that. My cousin caught them really good on it this past weekend too.
Yeah.
So I would keep that bait, kind of similar to what Michael said. He said the mag draft. It's very similar to that.
Right.
It just stays right underneath the surface, and it goes just like a swim bait. It's just a big old swim bait, is what
I'm
it is.
surprised no one's even said like a buzz bait or anything.
Well, that's what I was getting to next. I mean, that's why I asked him 2 baits.
Yeah.
Because I'm gonna have to have like a flipping bait.
You can have a couple of those.
So
right?
what I was gonna say is, God, there's like 4 baits. I wanna say.
Well, go ahead, go
The
for it.
big wind comes up, I'm gonna throw the glide bait everywhere I go.
And Robbie,
Around shot from the back of the creek to the front.
let me ask you, okay,
Okay, main lake,
right.
all the way to 2 foot of water in the back.
Let me ask you a question about, because a lot of people haven't fished that glide bait.
Yeah.
It catches a lot of big fish.
Yeah.
A lot of tournaments have
Lot of
been won
small
on it
fish,
just
too.
over the last couple of years. It's gotten extremely popular. You set me up with some, you gave me one
Yeah.
for my birthday, which
Yeah.
I appreciate
Christmas.
a lot. What is the rod and reel and line setup
Well,
that you
I
use?
personally haven't dissected that to 100% yet, but I throw it on my Alabama rig setup. The same thing, the 7.7 heavy with a fast tip. I want a soft tip. I want a good backbone. It's a heavier bait. And I think Michael and these guys would agree with me to saying, yeah. I mean, some guys go extreme and they want an 8-foot rod.
You can't go any bigger with that rod.
I just do not like a big, obnoxious, long, big, heavy rod, a broomstick rod. I want a tip like these FX Extremes. I want a soft tip that loads really good when I cast it and loads really good when they bite it.
Right.
But I want enough ass, is what I like to say, to horse in the big one
Yeah.
and that bait itself.
And it'll just depend on the weight of your swim bait. If you
Yeah.
get to throwing like the Legend or something like that,
Yeah.
that's a little bigger.
It's a little
You
different.
might go.
The
There's
beta-
the
yeah.
FX. You guys probably have them. It's the 710 heavy
Yeah,
mod.
I got those
And
too. Mm-hmm.
it's a mod, so it does have some more parabolic bend to it, and really keep those fish pinned on a bigger bait like that pretty good.
And the,
That-
and the
that
bait
would only
I'm
be
talking
if it's
about
big.
personally is just a 6-inch glide bait.
Yeah,
It's not
that's-
maybe as obnoxious as the
Right.
big KGBs and all that stuff.
I could talk hours on rod and reel setups and swim baits. I'll be at the shop tomorrow.
We can both be, and
That would-
Michael might be able to learn me on that.
That would
because
be,
I'm just getting into
that
it
would be on
myself.
Wednesday. What, Robbie, what's?
me go back to what I was
size
saying.
line?
Huh?
What size line?
20-pound fluorocarbon or
20,
20
or
to
25.
25-pound fluorocarbon, or you could use a heavy monofilament. I wouldn't recommend braid. I don't like it whatsoever, but I'm kind of new. Like I said, I'm new in that deal. It really opened my eyes. Michael's probably the one to talk about on the setup, but I think the one that I use, the 7.7 heavy fast, is perfectly fine for that. It's enough rod, it's enough reel,
For
find me
that bait.
Absolutely. You can't find one even, but I mean, maybe a 7.9 something, or a 7.10 like Culberson said, maybe a little bit longer with the same kind of bend
Yeah.
at the tip.
Yeah, and that 20-pound.
Yeah, get you a little more distance. But I don't know. I could go in like you
how
said.
do you like to fish that, Robbie? What's
Slow
your, like,
retrieve.
just for the average
I
fisherman
like
like
to
me,
chase the big wind,
right?
direct wind, and even if I'm in the back of the creek, I want that wind coming straight into that creek. I personally think that bait, wind's never everything, but gosh,
It
this
is
time
with
of
that.
this time of year in that bait, it is your friend. You need it. You need it. You really do. But let me jump into what, besides the glide bait, which I think is going to be tremendous, and I got a bunch of them. and I'm ready, you know, and I've really opened my eyes to them.
Bunch
I
of
would
them
have to
at-
have
at
a flipping bait
at
to flip
Fitz's.
docks
Right, yeah,
for the
yeah.
pre-spawners like Steve talked about.
Right.
Before Steve hit on a good point. You can spook these fish so easy. When you get back there super shallow and you're wanting to maybe bed fish or just flip shallow, be quiet. That's some of the best advice I could give you. I learned that from a great fisherman, Roger Fitzpatrick. I fished with him one time about 5-6 years ago, and in the Missouri Invitational when I was co-angling. And I closed his locker a little too loud, and he was like, "Hey, partner, we're gonna have to be a little quieter than that." And I was like, "Man," and he's so right. You know, that underwater, that noise that you make slamming your rod locker or slamming your trolling motor in the
Or
water.
slapping your bait on
Just,
the water,
I
cleaning
use
it, all that.
the great example is at the bait shop when little kids come in and tap on the minnow tank. What do them minnows do? And that's the same thing the bass. It's the same thing everything in that water does. When they hear that loud ass noise,
Yeah.
they spook, and that might mess you up on winning the big bass bash. Come in there, be stealthy. Pitch the back corners with a brush hog. That's what I was getting to my next bait. I would have to have a Texas rig brush hog on depending on water clarity, a 3/8 ounce or a 5/16 sinker. And that brush hog is such a big fish bait. Golly, I've caught so many big ones, and so has everybody else. Pitch the back corners, pitch the sides, pitch the open wells, and then slide back in there real slowly. You fish with Wayne Dad, you know how important it is to stay quiet and be stealthy. Keep the trolling motor on obnoxiously slow. Like, you want to get in there and do your thing, but it's important to be stealthy, get your flips in. It could cost you the bash if you're not stealthy. So that's, I would say, a brush hog, glide bait, and man, a spinner bait every year. I worked the weigh-in station at PB2, and I can't tell you how many bass I've weighed in at PB2 on a spinner bait in the fall and the spring. So when the wind comes up, it's the same deal. You know, moving baits. Moving baits are going to be humongous, and then have yourself a great pitching bait that you have caught. Like Culberson said, fish your strengths. That was probably the best statement said all night.
Yeah.
You know, fish your strengths. Don't do something that you think you gotta do. Do something that you're confident in.
Robbie, are you guys well stocked on those E-Factor baits? I know they've been catching a lot of big fish lately.
Steve's coming back down
Yeah.
to load me up. I have a great selection. All 3 locations has the E-Factor spinner baits. I got more on the way. We got War Eagle spinner baits as well. We got the Papa's custom baits. Steve Calteri, he makes a good spinner bait as well. So, and yeah, the Trophy Bass Company as well, you know, which is a great, I got a lot of options. So
Good deal.
come talk to me and Harlan and the guys at Fitz's, and we'll lace you out if you're unfamiliar with them.
And I'm sure you'll help them out with colors,
Absolutely.
based on conditions and things like
Absolutely.
that. Good deal. Thank you, Rob. Congratulations on this
Thank
last
you.
weekend.
Thanks,
It's
Bob.
something nobody's done.
Yeah.
25 pounds 2 days in a row,
I told
on a
them if
five
there was
fish
another
limit
on
tournament.
Monday, I'd be like, man, we gotta go.
I wanted to ask you one last question regarding that.
I know
And then
Harlan
I
and
get
Cole
to,
would have loved to take a swing at it.
I always got one last question, but then I'll come back to Steve.
Yeah.
So, did you catch any of your key fish on Sunday? The same places
Yeah.
that you caught some of your key fish on
Absolutely.
Saturday?
And like I told you earlier, I really think that's a test to, they were positioned in there so good, I think because of the food train, because of the current. Ever since that OMTT, when these guys fished, we had 35,000 cubic feet per second pulling through there for 2 straight weeks. And then they toned it down. Yeah, they toned it down to like 17 to 20, but that's still plenty. And I just think that the current really had them piled in there pretty good.
So you dragged 25 pounds back on Saturday.
There was new spots though
from some stuff.
because of conditions.
And I'm kind of thinking about the big bass bash. So, a lot of guys like me, I don't want to practice before a big tournament because I don't want to catch the big one before a big tournament. But if you're going back to back, which big bash 2 days, so I guess maybe conditions related or whatever, but it's like you go catch a 5, 6, or 7 pounder, next day go right back to it because it
Yeah,
might
I mean,
replenish.
there could
the
be-
only one there.
There could be something to that,
Yeah.
Dad, but 17 days out this time of year, it's
Yeah.
so hard to tell.
I know.
You know what I mean? I mean, it just depends on the rain we get.
Right.
We could get a massive rain between that.
Yeah.
They could be running even more current.
Right.
And there very well could be.
That's why we're doing
a
these, that's why we're doing these weekly.
You definitely want to go, I mean, it's never a bad idea to go back to a spot where you caught a big one the day before.
Right.
I mean, everybody does it. It's like, dude, I got this spot.
Well, they were there for a reason.
Yeah. But it could have been just an isolated single,
Right.
you know, bass
Yeah,
instead of
yeah.
multiple. So yeah, absolutely. You know, go back to a spot that you got confidence in. But the ultimate bottom line, I think, is play the conditions and fish your strengths.
Got
like
it.
You said.
That's
it.
awesome, Robbie. Thank you,
Yeah.
man, and congratulations
You bet. Thanks,
on your
Bob.
success this
Yep.
weekend. Steve, what do you think, buddy? Did they cover everything?
They pretty much did, but, you know, to be honest with you, you know, if I got two lures to choose, and I'm a river fisherman, I'm wanting to fish dirty water and shallow water.
Me too.
That being said, for this tournament here, I'm looking for the clearest water where I can see the best.
I'll be darned.
Because that day before the tournament, even 2 days before the tournament, I'm going looking. I'm not catching fish. I'm just going and looking for males, and to where I think a female will be in that dock or that dock or that dock. And then I'm gonna go approach them with the exact same bait as you talked about, the 8-inch mag draft, which is a great swim bait. If you've seen the Chris Alding's video where he's skipping it under docks and
it's very
stuff like
skippable.
that.
Oh, man.
Exactly, so you can get it where you need to
Hit the
get.
button.
It has the size that you want to draw that big bite. My second lure, I'm gonna choose a flipping jig, 1/2 ounce flipping jig, green pumpkin. I'm choosing that bait because I can pick them off the bed on that bait. I can swim it. I found as I got older, I got lazy, and I can take a jig and I can fish it like a spinner bait, like a square bill crankbait, or fish it on the bottom like a jig. So
That's good
And I can catch
Sounds like
fish
my dad.
all different ways doing that. And, so that lure is so versatile, I would pick that as my second bait.
Right.
But I'm gonna lean hard on the swim bait to try to catch that big bass under that dock.
And under that dock, is there some kind of rock that you're gonna look for behind that dock, or does it matter?
Well, if the water's real low right now, the fish they're not gonna spawn on pea gravel because it's dry.
Right.
So it's impossible. What they end up doing is they end up spawning on the end of the channel, an indentation of the channel, or anything like that. And if there's a dock in front of it, all the better, because then they got that they feel like they're a little more protected, I guess. Maybe, you know, they feel like, you know, there's less pressure, less people getting to them that way. Even though I know that they're not really afraid of us as fishermen, because you can sit on a bedding fish and, you know, the thing won't flinch, and then an eagle flies over and it freaks it out. So that's what they're afraid of, you know, but still I'm approaching it from a distance. Electronics shut down. I'm shutting everything down on the boat that's making any kind of noise. If I'm shallow enough, I'm using a push pole, so I don't have to hit the trolling motor or anything like that. And just really being stealthy. You
Yeah.
know, think of your hunting more than you're fishing.
Right.
So just kind of what Robbie said about what Roger, it's exactly right. It's like you're going through the woods, you're not trying to be noticed, you're sneaking in there. So
Right.
next thing you know, you're there before they know you're there, and that bait's there, and they're in their natural setting, and she eats it. So,
You're not hunting 2-year-old bucks, you're hunting 10-year-old bucks.
Yeah.
Right.
exactly.
Exactly.
And another thing for this tournament here, and this is something that probably a lot of people don't do, which they need to do. When we're fishing a tournament for big money, okay, and this is $100,000, that's big money. We're new line, new hooks. If you're fishing a spinnerbait, don't throw that old spinnerbait that you've been using. Throw a new spinnerbait, because what's gonna happen is a big bass is gonna bite it, and you're gonna come back with just a wire and a
Broken in
blade.
half.
But you use a new spinnerbait, new hooks, check your hooks, make sure that hook ain't bent over, because you need to make sure that you're ready for if you get that chance.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people get that chance in this tournament.
And don't get in the
They're
boat.
not ready, they got
Yeah,
old fishing
don't get
line
it
on
in.
for
That's-
next year.
that's well
They
said.
break their line, they lose fish because the drag isn't set down tight enough to get a good hook set. Make sure that not only you're on top of your boat, but you're on top of your fishing.
That is great advice.
Great
That's great
advice.
Otherwise, you'll be sorry.
Yeah.
Well, guys, gosh, this is great. So Hey, 0-17 all. We'll be back here next week, which will be 0-10 next Tuesday. We'll have some of our same panel. We'll probably have some others joining the panel. So if you want to win the Big Bass Bash, this is where you need to be. We appreciate Boatwrx for sponsoring and supporting this series of roundtables with such great anglers and such great information. You can go any place in the country, and there's no place that runs a Big Bass Bash type of style tournament as good as this one does, and have platforms like Boatwrx and Bass and Bob to help to provide you with the pre-tournament information. So Joe McBride, thank you. Austin Culberson, thank you. Michael Harlin, thank you. Rob Bueltmann, Bass and Rob, good job this weekend. Thank you so much. And Steve Wilson, thank you for your weekly reports and always your support with your fishing insights.
Thanks, Bob.
Thanks, Bob.